As you likely know by now, especially if you heard the last episode of the MacCast, the big reveal at Apple's latest event was their new Mac Studio products, both the Mac Studio Macintosh and also the new updated Studio Display. And since then, as you might imagine, we've been hearing a lot more information about what's going on with the Mac Studio, specifically what's happening inside of the Mac Studio. One of the things we mentioned last time was that in the teardown of the studio, YouTuber Max Tech discovered that the SSDs inside there were actually slotted in, not soldered to the motherboard. And as a matter of fact, there were two SSD slots with only one of them being filled. So that led to a lot of speculation in the community about whether or not we could update or upgrade the drives in our Mac Studios. And YouTuber Luke Miani tried to actually swap out the SSD from one Mac Studio and put it into another, and noticed that while the machine did recognize the drive, it would not boot, whether or not it was swapped from another device or whether he just tried installing a cleanly formatted drive in that second slot. So he was unable to get it up and running. That kind of led to some speculation that Apple maybe had some sort of software block in there. But then later in the week, iFixit came by and did their actual teardown, and they played around with this a little bit as well. They tried swapping out drives. They tried putting them into the extra slot. That wasn't working. But what they did discover was that if they took the same size storage from one Mac Studio and put it into another studio's drive, and then use the configurator app to do a DFU restore, they could get it to work. So it does seem that it's possible to replace a drive as long as it is exactly the same storage size. But if you try to update or upgrade or put it into that secondary slot, it's not really clear if that's possible. I would think, and this is just my pure speculation at this point, it might be possible for Apple to do that, or maybe an Apple Authorized Repair Center. Maybe there's some special software. So it could still be a possibility, but based on a lot of the testing done by a lot of smart people out there who, play around with Apple hardware, it's not seeming like that's a possibility right now, at least not for an end user. Now, I wouldn't put it past the very, very smart folks over at OWC to maybe figure out a way around this, and time will tell. But, a lot of people playing around with this, and it's really not clear if you will be able to upgrade. It's also really not clear at this point if that second SSD slot is actually connected or functional. I have to imagine, though, that maybe for some of the higher storage machines, like when you go up to the 8 terabytes, which I don't think anybody has had one of those machines for testing yet, or that I have seen, that maybe that second slot is used for a second drive. Maybe it's just 4 terabyte drives in the 8 terabyte configuration, and we just haven't seen that yet. So that could be something that could come out later. But again, that's pure speculation on my part at this point. The Studio Display also has some interesting things about it that were not sort of disclosed. It's now been discovered that the Studio Display has 64 gigabytes of storage, although it looks like right now only about 2 gigabytes are used for the operating system or software. So this information was shared in a tweet by a developer who goes by Chaos Tian. And the theory right now is that because there is an A13 Bionic chip in the new Studio Display, and that the smallest storage option on an A13 iPhone was 64 gigabytes, that the controller in the A13 may just not support NAND flash sizes below 64 gigabytes, which is an interesting theory. There's also the theory that Apple just buys NAND in bulk, and it actually may be more cost effective for them to use 64 gigabytes, even though they don't need that much storage in a Studio Display. Some of the extra space could be used for future software updates, but again, they're only using about 2 gigs right now. So there's just a lot of available space inside that display for seemingly no reason. I guess at some point, maybe Apple could open up the storage for different reasons, but it's not looking like they're doing that currently. Now, Mac rumors also got their hands on an internal Apple support document that seemed to indicate that the stands for the studio displays actually could be updated or changed, just not by end users. You're actually going to have to go to an Apple store or an Apple Authorized Service Provider to get those swapped out. So initially, it seemed like you had to order the stand or display that you wanted when you made your purchase. So if you went, say, with the VESA mount, that you wouldn't be able to then do the tilt and adjust stand, but you can do that if you take it into Apple, apparently. Now, there's no word on exactly what that swap would cost or if the parts for doing it are ever going to be made publicly available, but at least there is an option for later swapping out your display connector or display stand connector. Anyway, speaking of things being removable or not removable, we already mentioned that it appeared the Studio Display's cord was not removable. It turns out that's not quite 100% true. There does seem to be a special tool available to Apple and, again, Apple Authorized Service Providers or the Apple Store to be able to replace that cord, but it is going to be something you're going to have to still go into the Apple Store to do. It's not end user serviceable, although somebody did already make a 3D printed version of the tool so that you could pull the cord out yourself. That seemingly would actually void your warranty, so I wouldn't advise doing that. But yeah, the cord is replaceable and serviceable, just again, not by the end user. So Apple keeping that closed at this point, it seems to be. The Studio Display also enables Hola Siri. I almost said it. For older model Macs. So normally to use the Hola Siri functionality, you would need to get a MacBook Pro released in 2018 or later, or an iMac released in 2020 or later, basically later model Macs. Because that feature is now built into the Studio Display, that means you can actually use the feature on older Macs, like a 2016 or 2017 model of the 13-inch MacBook Pro or 15-inch MacBook Pro, or say a 2017 through 2019 model of the 21.5-inch or 27-inch iMac, or maybe even a 2019 Mac Pro or a 2018 or newer Mac Mini, as long as they're connected to that Studio Display, and that's thanks to the onboard A13 Bionic chip and that built-in mic array. So bringing functionality to older Macs, which is pretty cool. Now, early buzz for the Mac Studio products is and has been a really good thing. There's a lot of excitement about these machines in our community. I've actually heard from several of you in the MacCast community who are picking up new Mac Studios, and a lot of you are professionals, so that is awesome. But Ming-Chi Kuo thinks that all of this actually is boding very well for Apple. In a recent research note, he's predicting that Apple could sell between 500 to 600,000 units of each. So 500 to 600,000 units of the Mac Studio and 500 to 600,000 units of the Mac Studio Display or the Apple Studio Display before the end of 2022. That is really, really good, and it just shows that Apple Silicon is proving to be very, very popular in our community. Now, in the same note, he also says that Apple will aggressively expand their mini LED supply chain capacity in the next year or the coming year by up to 20 to 30%. So Apple also driving hard into the mini LED technology, which means that I would suspect that we'll see more mini LED products and displays coming to Apple products in the near future.